We're live once again here on the SABC News channel. Good morning and welcome. I am Alicia Jali. This is Media Monitor. We've got a great show lined up for you today. But first, let's give you a very quick update on the leading stories at 900 hours. The Abatembu Nation will hold a meeting this morning at Bumban, a great place outside Mthatha in the Eastern Cape, to discuss who should replace Jail King Gwelekhaya Dalingebo. The king is serving a 12-year jail term for various crimes. The city of Cape Town has defended its baboon management program amid accusations by animal activists that it's ineffective. 2 baboons from a protected species were shot and killed in Scarborough in the Cape Peninsula last month. Only 7 of the animals remain. An online petition to save the baboons has been launched and it has attracted thousands of signatures. The Mexican Attorney General's office says it will begin the process of extraditing recaptured drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman to the U.S. Authorities say the move was in line with the U.S. extradition request from 2014. On Friday, Guzman was detained and sent back to the maximum security prison he escaped from 6 months ago. All right, let's now have a look at some of the front pages of our Sunday newspapers. There is the Sunday Times and it's leading with the headline about the government's approach to the latest racial slurs that have dominated the news recently. The City Press leads with the headline about Western Cape ANC chairperson Marius Fransman's accuser, who is now said to have been offered money to withdraw the case of sexual assault. There's the Sunday Independent and it's leading with a story about ANC's commitment to offering 4.6 billion rands in university funding for poor students in a bid to stop the student revolts. The Weekend Argus leads with the same headline as the Sunday Independent about the ANC's 4.6 billion rand fund to financially disadvantaged students. And that's the Sunday Tribune also leading with the ANC's 4.6 billion rand package to stem the student revolts. All right, my first guest this morning is Mr. Vuyo Mvogo, our very own contributing editor. Sir, good morning to you and happy 2016. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and it's good to be here.
All right. Well, thousands of African National Congress supporters flocked the Royal Bafokeng Stadium in Rustenburg yesterday, where President Jacob Zuma addressed the party's political agenda for the year with the annual January 8 statement. Vuyo, you covered the event. Just basically give us a bit of a snippet of what you saw happening there yesterday.
Well, I mean, as is usually the case on with the January 8th, statement rally. I mean, it was packed to capacity, but I think because of the, the sun was scorching. So many people, in fact, left just as soon as they, almost as soon as they arrived. In and around Rustenburg, there was no doubt you could see, it was ANC everywhere. And party faithful, really all excited, to be there. But coming to the statement itself, obviously President Zuma gave an executive summary of what was contained in what was a much broader statement, which I think basically covered all the basics. I think everything that needed to be said was said. But just, from where I said, I just thought it lacked a bit of nuance. Did it inspire confidence among members, Vuyo? No, it did. That the ANC was very much in charge, that it cared about virtually everything, well, almost, that people care about. But I just think that it didn't give the sort of, the kind of emphasis, or nuance. I thought an occasion like that should give or should do. On the question of racism, for example, which has been an issue over the past week, I thought that although the president spoke about it, he didn't get to the kind of detail that would have given the ANC and the nation a sense that it's an issue that he and the ANC care about, and perhaps more importantly, how or where to go from here. It was more like a condemnation. It's a minority, and we should reject those
and hence establish the
people.
task team.
But I think it could have been, or perhaps should have been, a lot more nuanced. I mean, the same with the incidents of the past month, emanating from the whole finance minister saga. I think to have kept quiet, on that was, to me, a bit of a missed opportunity.
Look, we're going to talk more about the racism issue in greater detail, but I just want to know, I mean, looking at the interviews and everybody that we spoke to yesterday, a lot of people had different expectations that, they needed the president to address. Now, you've given us your side, but do you think that the people were equally satisfied?
Broadly speaking, I think they were. And remember, the people who filled up that stadium were party
loyalists.
Faithful. Yeah, these are members of the ANC. They love their organization or their party, no doubt about that. So, I mean, you would struggle really to get seriously disgruntled people, because they were there precisely to show the support for their organization, for their president, and to say, we are in it together, So you would have battled to find really disgruntled people. You would have had to greatly offend people to have, gotten people
I see what you mean. But now, look, the issue of the president not going to Marika and on to going to offer those houses, did it not hinder now the process of restoring back that confidence, especially with that thorny issue of Marika? And we spoke about this.
It's one of those sort of what I thought were lost opportunities. I think security fears can be exaggerated at times, and I think they stop leaders from being human, number one, but two, from perhaps correcting wrongs, because I have no doubt in my mind that when the ANC or the government looks back at the past couple of years, back on that day when that unfortunate incident happened and how it handled that saga subsequently, I think they're full of regrets. Although, of course, I mean, you remember yesterday when we spoke to Gwede Mandashe,
yes.
he put up a brave face and underscored the importance of, maintaining law and order and avoiding anarchy, that if you do what the people did that week, that fateful week, you're inviting anarchy, but also you're inviting police to sort of come down hard on you. But I just don't think, and even with the benefit of hindsight, I just don't think that should have been the approach. But the ANC has chosen to handle it.
Look, we're speaking of holding brave face, the issue of the alleged divisions in the party. Was that something that was, very big in terms of conversation among party members?
Well, I mean,
because that's another thing that's always, gets cold water poured on it very quickly.
Well, I mean, this time around, I think acknowledgements were made that it remains an issue. The president, in his own speech, made that acknowledgement. Leaders of the tripartite alliance acknowledged that it is an issue, and they were calling basically on each other to rally behind their party and actually deal with the problem and make sure that they do not jeopardize the party's chances in an election year. So that matter, I think, was acknowledged to a very large extent and as a very serious issue, but everyone virtually promising or committing to actually making sure that they heal the divisions and they work towards the greater good, of the party and of everyone.
Let's expand on that. I mean, that issue of the alliance partners not being given a platform to speak, do you think it deepens the factions between the ruling party and
No, they were.
The alliance?
I mean, they did offer. In fact, they were allowed to give their messages of support as per the tradition. And when we asked them, everyone seemed to deny this thing, putting the blame at the door of the media. There's all the media reports. We don't know where it came from. So, yeah. But at the end of the day, all of them got their chance to speak and offer their messages of support as per a tradition, the tradition of the January 8 rally.
All right. Now, in a wrap, Vuyo, I mean, what do you think is going to happen now after the January 8 statement? Do you think that the ANC is going to recognize those goals that they've set for 2016?
Well, what usually...
Especially looking at the elections that are coming up.
Well, I mean, what usually happens is that cabinet goes to a Lekgotla, with premiers from across the country, where they then, from the marching orders that the ANC executive gave via the January 8th statement, they then begin to tease it out and then talk specifically about what happens to land now on the land issue, what happens on education, job creation, and all those things. Then from that cabinet, Lekgotla, it will then give all the pointers and preparation towards the president's State of the Nation address, and subsequently how those goals and dreams are going to be funded, which will then feed onto the finance minister's budget statement. So basically, that's how it's gonna evolve from here.
All right. Look, let's go back to the issue of alliance and partners. Another interview you did with Blade Nzimande there, he said, the ANC should address certain members in its fold that are actually trying to push out the SACP.
Well, I mean, there's a very interesting dynamic, and there's no doubt some undercurrents, because, I mean, Blade was frank about the fact that there are these divisions, or there are these people who want to push out members of the South African Communist Party, and other people they disagree with. But he did also say that he believed they were in the minority. We had an interview with the president late yesterday, and as much as, although he made the acknowledgements, he didn't think it was a serious issue, and he didn't think that the divisions were such that they threatened to tear the ANC apart. Even asked him, I mean, you remember that last week we had an interview with the ANC Women's League president, Batabile Dlamini, who made no bones about the fact that they are onto the agenda of getting a woman for president. And I asked him, but I mean, who's allowed to canvass openly, which I think she did, and who's not allowed, given the stance that the ANC had taken, that no one should
say
canvass.
Anything about that?
Well, he said he doesn't think it's prohibited, but perhaps it's not the thing to do, given that it's an election year and the focus should be on the election and not on some leadership tussles and so on. But it was a bit, about it.
All right, let's leave it there for now. We will have more on this discussion when Media Monitor returns shortly after this break.
Born with malformation of the limbs, David lives his life to the fullest.
I got this. Let me try my own. Got on the bed, then start playing soccer in the streets, then do this.
He can play soccer, he reads and writes, he is even able to swim, a role model to his peers.
Look at the scripture. It doesn't say I'm a conqueror, it says I'm more than a conqueror.
Join your host Buleng Mulebati on Bupilong every Friday at 17:30.
Welcome back. Joining us now is Professor Tinyeko Malulego, a political analyst, and we're still with Mr. Vuyo Mvoko, SABC contributing editor. Sir, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much and happy 2016.
Thank you.
All right. Well, do share your views on our discussions on our social media page at SA Media Monitor. Now, social media is a marvelous invention, allowing anyone to express their opinions on any subject, but your everyday social media posts could destroy your career. The recent case of now former DA member Penny Sparrow's Facebook post referring to black people as monkeys has cost her a job. Gareth Cliff has been fired as Idol's judge following free speech comment, and Gauteng Sports Arts, Culture and Recreation Department suspended employee Velaphi Khumalo after his racist comments. Standard Bank's outspoken economist Chris Hart is suffering a similar whirlwind after an opinionated tweet went viral. Let's take a look at more on this insert.
We call on all the people of this country to work together and defeat the demons of racism and tribalism. It is clear that there is a tiny minority in our country that still harbors a desire for separate amenities and who idolize apartheid era leaders who made our country the skunk of the world.
Now, Prof, let me start with you on this one. Vuyo's already said that he felt that the president on the racism issue didn't do as much as he was supposed to. What did you think?
Yeah, I would agree. Look, I think his was an executive summary. That's what he said at the beginning of his speech. So one hopes that there is more to that section of his speech in the longer document. But I would have thought that he could have said more. In fact, this stuff you read in the papers today about a hard line on racism that government is taking is totally absent in that speech. There is no hard line there. If anything, it is a very soft line because he says a tiny minority is a problem.
But what kind of hard line then do we need to address these issues, Prof?
Well, obviously we need more. I mean, people are talking about criminalization. It's a good start. It's not the answer because you know, clearly, by the time a person utters a racist statement, a lot has happened in their interaction with fellow South Africans and their perceptions of them. And the idea that racism is what people say is also very shallow because racism is not just what people say. Certainly not just what people say on the social media. Because if you talk to workers, they experience it at multiple levels, on the shop floor, in the houses of people for whom they work, in the streets. And of course, it has an economic face as well. So I think we'll have to think hard about what to do. We can't just not do nothing, but we certainly shouldn't just think of stopping people from saying, because that's easy. People can stop saying. But will they stop thinking? Will they stop doing? Will they stop structuring it and framing racism? So it's going to take more, in my view, than just criminalization. And I thought the president could have helped us along and discussed a little bit those kinds of things. But maybe it wasn't the place for him to do it.
So you think the task team that is going to be established is not going to be effective?
I think it's a good start. I think it's a step in the right direction. But ultimately, you know, think about it this way. In this country, if you go to any company, any institution, you will find that the racial stratification is still totally in place. The people who do the gardens, the people who make the tea, the people who clean, all look the same. And, you know, so until you alter that, it will be very difficult to have an effective campaign against racism because it just becomes a matter of talk. So people stop saying it because it can lose you your job. So you don't mention it, but you just do it under the table.
What do you think, Vuyo?
No, I also think, I mean, as much as it's okay to say it's a tiny minority, but racism hurts to those who experience it. And given our history, the people who experience racism more or who feel the impact of racism are black people.
True.
Because historically, you know, they were subjugated. Historically, they are the most disadvantaged. So racism hits them doubly. White people, by and large, do not have the kinds of problems or the experiences of black people. So I don't think it's something that should be dismissed, precisely because it hurts people who are vulnerable and who are in the majority in this country. Yes, half of it will probably be mere perceptions. You know, when someone tries to explain their situation or to get out of a situation, it's easy to blame, say so-and-so is being racist, like someone who doesn't do their work, you know, and when they get confronted by a boss who happens to be white, they will say it's racism. There are such incidents, but in the main, or by and large, it is something that is being felt and it affects the majority of people in this country, and it's something that cannot be left to chance simply because someone believes it is a tiny minority that is responsible for it.
But then do you believe that racism and supremacy has gone unanswered, unchecked and unrestrained for far too long?
Yeah,
How do
I
we
think
start
so.
those debates then?
I think so. You know, I mean, when Vuyo says racism hurts, even that sounds so inadequate for me. Because racism is what stops people from getting jobs. So racism kills. It doesn't just hurt. It kills. It kills metaphorically. It kills literally. It stops people dead in their self-development and in their advancement. But ultimately, it holds the country back quite importantly. So it's not a tiny little thing confined to a tiny minority, because it's not just people, it's also structures that are in place that breed and make sure that racism continues. So you need to address that, not just what people say, but also how you have constructed your structures. I mean, we may not use the word, but we know how people are kept out, how people are treated inhumanely, and how people simply die. Their spirits just die and they shrivel up and they walk to work and back, but they know that, you know, nothing is going to come out of their effort. So it's a lot more serious than just insult in the sense of the words that are said to you. I think there are people who lose their lives and livelihoods because of racism.
Look, let's elaborate on this. Who can best elaborate this for us? How would this now, a specific law to criminalize racism and promotion of apartheid work?
Well, I think it'll go some way, but also it then allows us to sort of begin to engage on how racism manifests itself, the things that Prof is talking about, and how it even goes to kill not only people, but our nation, our country. Which means that we cannot reach our full potential, because of the effects, the effects that racism has on people and on our country. But I do think that this will allow us to start having those conversations in the same way that, you know, we've seen when the courts begin to grapple with the issue, with racism in all its manifestations, we get to appreciate the reality. We then also get to it begins to like sensitize people, and but also to make them see it in motion instead of being idealistic or making sort of theoretical assumptions or conclusions about the racism. In the same way that an Oscar trial, you know, helped us understand the law, you know, in the same way, and the impact certain things have. I think this matter going to the courts and being dealt with there will go a very long way towards getting us to understand and to appreciate the reality.
Prof?
Yeah, look,
very quickly.
I mean, the thing is, I think that what we need is also some kind of movement, a white people's movement, if I may say so, very kindly and very respectfully, I think that blacks have theorized racism. They have lived it, and they have tried to understand it, and all sorts of things. I'm not so sure that many, and I can't speak for all white South Africans, because I have met many white South Africans who have thought about it deeper than even I have. But I think in that section of our community, there needs to be some leadership. So Penny Sparrow says what she does, but you've got Gillian Skete, for example, who is a lone voice, who is talking and writing against white racism, and she is white. I mean, people like her, we need more of those in this country, and I think we need to provide them with a lot more support, because it's not a white problem, it's not a black problem, it's a white problem, in the sense that he was just describing it now.
Prof, hold that thought. Let's take a look at what the people at home are saying on Twitter. All right, those tweets there. Mazwaivo Klega says, too much. I concur with those people saying that racists should be incarcerated. I am African, says our South African history is told from a single viewpoint, almost as if it serves to relive the past and not educate. And of course, Bongenkosi there says social cohesion should not be a dream in the pipeline. It must be real and practical. Bongan Ngobo says these are not outbursts. These are real concerns. We are demanding our dignity as black people. Last but not least, Advocate Stephen Kosi says it is a futile exercise to beg adults not to be racist. We need harsh laws to solve the problem. All right, well, do stay tuned for more after this short break. This is Media Monitor.
Makamelo Sekhuntse, one strong woman who said no to hunger. She never allowed circumstances to pull her down. At daybreak, she is up and running in the streets of Johannesburg to make her living. After 12 hours of hard work, she goes back home being able to put food on the table. Join me, Bulemo Lebatsi, on your show about those who take on and conquer life challenges every Saturday at 5:30.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor right here on the SABC News channel. SANEF has urged journalists to exercise their right to freedom of speech within the confines of the Constitution and not to unnecessarily offend or cause hatred while on duty and in their private capacities. The statement comes after freelance journalist Corinne du Plessis' pentapreneur comments, as well as news anchor Andrew Barnes for mocking the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga's English pronunciation of the word epidemic. Gentlemen, how should journalists really deal with the issues at hand here? Well, let's start with you.
Look, I just think journalists they're a part of society, and they reflect the prejudices you have out there. They reflect the sentiment, the views, and the opinions that are out there. And it's probably good that in all the things, the controversies we've been mired in over the past week or the past month, a lot of journalists are involved. And that it then begins to debunk the myth that, we occupy a space above or like elevated from the rest of society. And it's good that it happened. It's not a good thing to happen, but it's good that it happened.
We're talking about starting such debates. Which better platform than media for the journalists to write about if we're going to start such debates and issues?
Well, I mean, that they are part of the problem is probably a good start in itself, so that the holier than thou, thing sort of,
fades away.
Comes to an end, because it simply isn't true. I mean, the people or the image we project of ourselves is often not the reality, of who we are. So it's a good thing.
Prof, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, I agree that the pretense that journalists do not evaluate, they just report, is a false one. Because journalists evaluate, they analyze. They are the first political analysts and commentators before anyone comes into the fray. And I think they need to embrace that and do it responsibly, but recognize that they have that role. But the other dynamic here is that social media is messing the journalists up in that, take the racism debacle of this week. It wasn't broken by any major media house. It was on the social media.
Yes.
And the media houses had to catch up. It wasn't the other way around. The people led, if one may use the people led and the media houses caught up. And in the attempt to catch up, they, I think, here and there overcompensated. And perhaps a remark such as the one of making fun of the minister is an extreme case of overcompensation from a media person who is behind the social media and trying to catch up with the social media, and forgetting that they are not on social media. They are on normal media, if one may say that. Whereas with Karine du Plessis' comment, it was it was in bad taste from a woman's point of view, but also from many other points of view. But then again, I mean, if you hear about the allegations of sexual harassment that overshadowed the January 8th statement, I mean, her comment is, it's in bad taste, but it pales in comparison to the allegations that we are hearing about. So,
but let's talk about this now, gentlemen. The issue of free speech versus hate speech for you. Where do we draw the line, and how do we determine that fine line as journalists specifically?
Well, it's the content. I mean, the constant struggle to try and balance with everything. With every right comes corresponding obligations, and that's the struggle that every society and country and person even has to deal with in your daily life. You have a freedom to say anything or to do anything, but remember, other people have rights too, so you don't infringe on their rights. So it is a test, yes, but I think a necessary test. It's something we ought to be doing. We should be conscious of the things we do and the things we say all the time, and striking that balance is a test of how mature you are. Striking that balance is a test of your skills, and if you're a leader, it's a test of your leadership. So life is constantly about that, about striking that balance.
Yeah, and it's also recognizing that the social media is not a private room. I mean, I and you can exchange messages on the social media. I can say, what time must I arrive? You say, no, arrive 15 minutes before, and so we must realize that the whole world is listening in when we do that. It's like this conversation between the three of us, very cozy, very nice, but basically someone is sitting in their living room and is part of this conversation.
True.
So the idea that you can say some things to your friends on social media, I didn't mean to harm anyone, I was just talking to my friends, it's nonsense. We must all realize that it's not like that. It's a public very, very public platform.
Look, now, how will that now impact on the journalist's objectivity, Vuyo?
What's objectivity again?
Objectivity.
No, I don't know. I have an issue
Being
with the whole notion
impartial.
of objectivity.
It's obviously not objective.
Is not impartial.
I mean, the whole notion of objectivity, I think, is it's a bit of a fallacious one. I don't think we're being real when we sort of, cast our discussions
Why
or
do you say that, Vuyo?
Because half the time we're not. We pretend we are, but I don't think we are. I mean, we dispense with views and opinions, like all the time, which are very personal and sometimes even
But
prejudicial.
isn't it a journalist's job
You
to
see,
be
for me-
objective?
for me,
right from
I think
the
to be
outset?
fair, I think fairness is for
Is the
me
better
what-
word.
Yeah.
I think fairness is a very good place. But for me, objectivity is being aware of your own biases and being open about them. That's the first thing. So being objective does not mean being beyond biases, because you can't be, but being aware of them. I mean, the worst thing is to hear a journalist who claims to be objective, and every word, every second word, you can tell they are not, but they are not even aware. And then you have pity for them. But so that's the first thing for me. It's being open to your own biases, owning up to them, and then distinguishing those from other people's views, and presenting more than just one view, So that's objectivity for me. It is not impossible to be objective, but objectivity includes awareness of your biases.
Vuyo?
No, I agree with Prof. I mean, I couldn't have put it better. Because I battle with the notion of objectivity and what it really, really means, because I think behind that, so I call it facade, is a refusal to actually acknowledge, that you are prejudicial, that you do have a worldview that often, or half the time at the very least, you push through, perhaps without being even aware that you are doing that.
Look, gentlemen, now the Andrew Barnes comment, how do we deal with such matters and of mispronunciation and in both ways, whether it's a white person or a black person? I mean, we've got 11 different languages in this country. We certainly can all pronounce the right words at all times. Vuyo?
Well, he is the epitome
Epitome.
of everything that is wrong.
You're not saying it
You
right.
got it right.
I must tell you, you're not saying it right. We must
Okay.
What's
say
the
the
proper
black way.
pronunciation
Epitome.
there, Professor?
after
Gentlemen, please, let's get to this issue. Prof, let's hear you.
Look, I think that it's a landmine. The whole area of language and pronunciation is a landmine that we have pretended does not exist, and we have closed our eyes to it.
Just like racism.
The extent to which black names, for example, are butchered daily. I mean, on the phone everywhere, you have to repeat your name, and of course, with the coming of freedom and democracy, people like Vuyo, who used to be called Thomas, went back to their difficult name and making lives very difficult for other people. So it's a whole area, and I don't think it's a black. You say it is both ways. It's not. It's often not both ways, really, because I've seen my white counterparts practice the French names and the German names until they pronounce them correctly. I've heard them say this, but I haven't seen the same kind of attempt to learn. And the idea that to speak, yes, I've been called all sorts of things. I've been called all sorts of things, including a snake, what it means in my language, tinyoka, and so on. Now, you see, I think that what needs to happen in this area is just a little bit more patience. And the idea that speaking English is the highest achievement, that if you speak English and you speak it correctly, you are clever, you are intelligent. That's what we need to disabuse ourselves of as black people. Even before you bring in whoever makes fun of our pronunciation of epitome, we need to say farewell to this idea that we must talk English correctly so that we appear intelligent. Because who speaks English correctly? Where?
Where did the term
In
"there's no
Liverpool-
master of pronunciation" emanate from? That's the issue.
Yeah, the thing is that, pronunciation differs from place to place, even in England. But I think it is a sign of our subjection as black people that we are corrected again and again when we make a mistake. And we don't correct anyone who makes a mistake, even with our names. We laugh it off.
All right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it for now. We'll have more shortly after this break. This is Media Monitor.
Makamelo Sekhuntse, one strong woman who said no to hunger. She never allowed circumstances to pull her down. At daybreak, she is up and running in the streets of Johannesburg to make her living. After 12 hours of hard work, she goes back home being able to put food on the table. Join me, Bule Molebatsi, on your show about those who take on and conquer life challenges every Saturday at 5:30.
Still watching Media Monitor, welcome back. Remember, you can still share your views on Twitter on our discussions today, where the experts have warned South Africans not to underestimate the current heat wave and to keep hydrated and out of the sun as South Africans' heat wave conditions continue. The heat wave actually coincides with the worst drought in years. Gentlemen, do we have the capacity to deal with the drought, do you think? Let's start with you, Prof.
Well, I think we obviously have not planned for it. Well, certainly not planned adequately for it, because if you see what the departments are doing, it does look like they are scrambling for corrective action.
Contingency plans.
Yeah, contingency plans, very late. And I mean, these adverts that you hear of us being encouraged to save water, I mean, one would have thought this was done a while ago and not just now. And so my fear is that if the drought continues, not only does it have economic implications, someone was even suggesting it could have social implications. Already some people died from
10
heat
people
stroke.
died from heat stroke, yeah.
Yes. And it could also trigger all sorts of things, such as migration into areas where there is more water. I mean, when water is scarce, we go back to our basic animal instincts, as it were, and people migrate to where water is, if water is more available in a place. So it could have ultimately some important social implications. So I just hope that government is able to step in even at this hour and provide leadership and assistance in this drought. I mean, the implications of drought is not just the water. There's a whole crisis of maize that we now have to import. I was in Limpopo last week. I didn't come back with a single Millie, because no one was able to plant successfully. Farmers and subsistence farming communities.
That's worrying for you.
Well, I mean, the integrity and resilience of any system, political or otherwise, is tested in situations like these, when you have unfortunate events or incidents that really push, you know, your resilience. And that is where you see the power of planning, the power of foresight, and indeed leadership. Because then people, if who exercise leadership, would have foreseen that in the event we have a situation like this, we are able to cope. And this is pushing, you know, our government to that point, to say, next time you need to prepare adequately. You need to put systems in place that ensure that when such eventualities occur, you are actually well or adequately prepared. Well, sometimes you may not even be able to actually do as much as you may not be able to deal or to help people with whatever challenge that they are facing. But when you inspire confidence that you are on top of the situation and you've done everything that you could possibly do, it does go a long way towards saying, like, giving people that assurance that we are indeed being led, you know, or we're being led by people who know what they are doing. We're being led by people who care, you know, and I think that is very important, although we haven't been pushed to that extent. But I think a time will come when people say, you know, we know that we're a water scarce country, but are we doing enough with what we are getting from Lesotho? You know, for example, are we doing as much as we can, you know, possibly do with agriculture? You know, are we really, you know, do we have what we need? But over and above that, what do we do with what we don't have? Are we striking? I mean, look at the scramble over AGOA over the past week.
Yes.
We missed deadlines, and we're now busy trying to catch up, and compromises we probably
similar issue with load
made
shedding as well.
now have to be made. The same goes for like load shedding. So these incidents or these events, unfortunate as they are, they do push us to the limit. Hopefully someone is learning.
You know, when you mentioned that, Professor, my other question was going to be, is government clearly then communicating the seriousness of the heat wave and, you know, the likely outcome or impacts that it could have?
Well, they have declared a few provinces disaster areas.
But what does it mean?
I
It's a
actually
disaster
think
area. Do people know what that means, Prof?
Well, the idea is that they are going to prioritize it, and that they are going to intervene with extraordinary measures beyond just saying don't wash your car. You know, a whole campaign to help us become more conscious of what we're going in. You see, the problem is that when a commodity is as basic as water, I mean, we speak about electricity. You gave the example of Eskom.
Yes.
Of course, when you have Eskom was also a poor planning problem, but at least you can go get a generator if you have the money to buy a generator or a candle or whatever, or you just cook outside. But there's no substitute for water. You know, so it becomes a very serious. You saw that little interruption in the speech of the president at Rustenburg.
At Rustenburg. Yes.
It had to do with water bottles, I believe. I was told that people were saying, well, we're not getting enough water. Why is water going that direction and not our direction? And then they said, no, you know. Now, I think that's a small metaphor of what may happen in the country as the commodity becomes more and more scarce, and people start to watch who's getting water and who's not getting it, and why are they getting it in that suburb and not us? And that could be the beginning of a lot of trouble. I mean, it was a small incident in the stadium, but it could become a national kind of incident as well.
All right. Well, gentlemen, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. But before we go, let's take a look at some of the tweets and hear what you have been saying to us on social media. And we're going to start with at Maisela says, I'm very scared of the current drought situation we're facing, because if it continues like this, it's going to mean poverty. Well, those are some of the concerns the professor has raised here on the show. Bridget Crawford says we should all be taking it very seriously, especially government. No food for the poor, no luxuries for the rich. Debo Hoserape says old infrastructure buildings and pipes are contributing to the heat wave. Solar can certainly help. And Ali Mashal says you are right with solar system, but the fact remains that it also has a bad impact on our financial status. And last but not least, Vilagazi, Langa Vilagazi says, no, I do not think so. Even the Save Water campaign is poorly marketed or communicated to the citizens. Well, that's where we leave it for today's first live show. We'd like to now thank our guests for partaking in our discussion this morning. That was the first live and exciting edition of your favorite program, Media Monitor, and we were broadcasting to live from our SABC studios here in Auckland Park. Do join us again next week, Sunday, for another jam-packed edition. I'm Alicia Jali. This is SABC News. Do enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.